It's 6 p.m. on a Wednesday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's first start with the headlines. Another strong aftershock rattles Gyeongju with more tremors expected to follow. Residents of the quake-hit city can expect more assistance now that the government's decided to designate it a special disaster zone. At the UN General Assembly, South Korea's foreign minister is busier than ever rallying support to rein in Pyongyang. On Tuesday alone, he spoke to his counterparts from Britain, Germany, and Bolivia. Volkswagen's head of emissions certification appears in Seoul for questioning, and the carmaker's emissions cheating scandal is the first official from Volkswagen HQ to testify outside of Germany. The southeastern city of Gyeongju is about to get some additional disaster relief after being jolted by two powerful earthquakes and ongoing aftershocks. Our Kim Young-gil has our top story.
At a special policy coordination meeting on Wednesday, officials from the ruling Saenuri Party, the government and presidential office of Cheongwade agreed to designate the southeastern city of Gyeongju as a special disaster zone in order to provide area residents with additional financial support. Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn said the designation was made to help the government secure additional funds to help local residents. Ruling party officials vowed to help the government review the nation's crisis management capabilities and emergency response systems in preparation for future earthquakes.
The central government will launch a special task force to help residents recover and to provide counseling to people suffering from anxiety due to the quakes.
Korea's weather agency will also upgrade its emergency response systems so it can immediately, within 10 seconds, send text messages to the public in the event of new quakes or other seismic events. Concerning North Korea's recent nuclear test, the officials present agreed to pursue additional sanctions on the North.
We agreed to implement independent sanctions on the North, alongside the UN Security Council's efforts to adopt stronger sanctions against North Korea, so that the regime has no option but to change its ways.
They also agreed to increase funding for measures to counter North Korea's development of submarine-launched ballistic missiles. President Park Geun-hye's chief of staff Lee Won-jung said the earthquakes and North Korea's nuclear provocations offer stark reminders of the mounting national security and economic challenges facing South Korea. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
The aftershock that jolted Gyeongju was slightly weaker than Tuesday's, measuring 3.5. But according to Hwang Ho-jun, concerns are continuing to rise as the number of aftershocks is still increasing as well.
Less than a day since Gyeongju was hit by a 4.5 magnitude aftershock, the southeastern city was jolted this morning by another tremor of magnitude 3.5. Wednesday's aftershock was detected shortly before noon, with the epicenter some 10 kilometers southwest of the city that was once the capital of the ancient Silla Kingdom. According to the Korea Meteorological Administration, Wednesday's tremor was one of the stronger aftershocks among the over 400 detected since the two major quakes hit the country last Monday. The Ministry of Public Safety and Security said no damage or casualties from the aftershock have been reported as of now. The agency said it's still checking for damage and asked people to pay attention to its reports in case of an emergency. With aftershocks continuing to shake the region, concerns are rising over the safety of the multiple nuclear power plants in the southeastern part of the peninsula.
Theoretically, the strongest quake that could hit the peninsula would be as high as magnitude 7. It's important to investigate the damage that these power plants could incur in the event of a stronger quake.
According to the Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power Company, the country's nuclear power supplier, reactors not undergoing scheduled maintenance are operating normally. Although experts are split on whether the tremors were caused by the same fault zones, they agree that aftershocks will likely continue for the next 3 weeks. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
South Korea's foreign minister continues his diplomatic efforts to strengthen cooperation against North Korea's provocations. While in New York for the UN General Assembly, he also questioned communist states' UN membership. Our Kwon So-hwa tells us more.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se held bilateral talks with his British, German and Bolivian counterparts Tuesday on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. The UK's Foreign Minister Boris Johnson agreed with Yoon that North Korea's nuclear tests present a serious threat and said that the UK, as a member of the UN Security Council, will do its part to help craft a new resolution against Pyongyang's provocations. Yoon asked Berlin's top diplomat Frank-Walter Steinmeier for greater cooperation on the bilateral and European Union fronts in enforcing sanctions on North Korea. The two agreed that South Korea and Germany are important partners, sharing the pain of being and having been nations divided. Yoon also met with his Bolivian counterpart David Choquehuanca Cespedes, whom he thanked for releasing statements condemning North Korea's fourth and fifth nuclear tests. Cespedes stressed, as a country that pursues peace, it is against the North's nuclear tests, which threaten peace and security. Given North Korea's continued violations of its obligations at the UN, Yoon also questioned Pyongyang's distinction in the organization. During an interview with the Associated Press, Yoon said all UN members should ask themselves whether North Korea is qualified for membership. The two Koreas have been members at the UN for a quarter of a century. Yoon also called the North a, quote, serial offender, adding the Security Council must close loopholes in existing resolutions. The minister also welcomed U.S. President Barack Obama and Chinese Premier Li Keqiang's agreement earlier this week to work together on North Korea issues. And while the minister will continue his diplomatic efforts in New York for the rest of the week, South Korea's representative to the six-party talks on the denuclearization of North Korea will make a visit to Beijing Thursday to talk with his counterpart on how to effectively deal with Pyongyang's ongoing threats. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
North Korea's nuclear test site is under the microscope again. According to military intel sources, the regime has covered its tunnels at the site. Connie Kim points out signs of Pyongyang prepping for a third nuclear test this year.
North Korea may be readying for yet another nuclear test at an unused underground tunnel at its Punggye-ri test site. Multiple sources within the South Korean government said Wednesday that North Korea has put a cover over the entrance of its second and third underground tunnel. The covers were set up even before the regime's fifth nuclear test on September 9th. Military and intelligence authorities are said to be keeping a close eye on any further activity that could suggest an imminent test. This month's nuclear test was conducted at the second underground tunnel, but no nuclear test has ever been conducted at the third tunnel. The U.S.-based North Korea monitoring website 38 North had previously noted the cover at the second tunnel entrance was not removed after this month's test. But it has been revealed for the first time that the entrance to the third unused tunnel has been covered. In 2013, Pyongyang covered the entrance of a tunnel at its nuclear test site less than 2 weeks before conducting its third nuclear test to stop U.S. intelligence authorities from determining whether a detonation was imminent. With Pyongyang claiming this week that it successfully tested a rocket engine for a geostationary satellite, South Korean and U.S. military and intelligence authorities are strengthening their monitoring of North Korea.
The North had boasted about its missile technology through an article in its official state-run newspaper a day after it has tested its rocket engine, indicating that the North is not willing to back away from its nuclear weapons development. If the North decides to conduct another nuclear test, it'll be the third one this year and the sixth overall. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The United States deployed 2 B-1B bombers to South Korea as part of its extended deterrence against North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. It's the second such flyover in 2 weeks, and one of the Lancers will remain in Korea's Osan Air Base for now. Kim Hyun-bin sheds light on the possible message carried by the show of American air superiority.
The U.S. has dispatched another pair of B-1B bombers to the peninsula in a show of force to Pyongyang, the second flyover by U.S. bombers in less than 2 weeks. One of the bombers dispatched today will remain at Osan Air Base, south of Seoul, for an indeterminate period, while the other has already returned to Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. Last Wednesday, Washington sent 2 B-1 bombers for a flyover, just days after North Korea's fifth nuclear test. The flyovers demonstrate the vulnerability of the North Korean leadership to American air power. Some experts believe the bombers were also sent to reassure South Korea and to discourage recent talk of Seoul developing its own nuclear arsenal to better counter North Korea's nuclear threats.
The B-1B has the strongest conventional bombing capabilities. These bombers came to the peninsula once again to pressure Pyongyang and to protest rising interest in South Korea in acquiring nuclear arms of its own.
The B-1B Lancer was developed to replace the B-52 and can fly lower, faster, and carry larger payloads. The B-1B is considered the backbone of America's long-range bomber force, with a payload of over 34,000 kilograms and a top speed of over 1,500 kilometers an hour. From Guam, it will take the bomber just 2 hours to reach the North Korean capital. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Turning our focus to the domestic political arena now, government officials face tough questions from lawmakers again. Today's focal points, national security and foreign affairs. Here's Shin Se-min with day 2 of the parliamentary Q&A session.
A dozen lawmakers from the ruling and opposition parties fired questions at government officials on the second day of a 4-day parliamentary interpellation session on Wednesday. National security and foreign affairs were the main topics of discussion. Of that, North Korea policy has gotten most of the attention, especially in the wake of the North's 5th nuclear test, considered one of the most powerful yet, and its submarine-launched ballistic missile tests. Some lawmakers, particularly those from the ruling Saenuri party, said the South Korea should consider developing its own nuclear weapons to counter North Korea. In response, Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn said the government will abide by international guidelines and Seoul will continue to work with its allies in denuclearizing the Korean peninsula. Hwang added that more sanctions must be imposed on the North to further starve the regime. Ahead of today's session, lawmakers had agreed to pass yet another resolution condemning the regime for its continued provocations and calling on the North to drop all of its nuclear development programs. The resolution also urged the South Korean government to set up a readiness system on national security and called for greater cooperation with the international community in dealing with the North. Even with this latest parliamentary resolution, there are still lingering questions as to whether the regime will ever change its ways, as it has already hinted at further provocations in the days to come. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
With Korea's biggest shipper sliding towards bankruptcy and a wider corporate restructuring drive underway, Korea's finance chief says the government will stick to the principle of only helping companies that first help themselves. Kim Min-ji shares with us the minister's message.
Korea's finance minister says the government will firmly push ahead with its ongoing corporate restructuring drive. Speaking at an economy-related ministers' meeting, Minister Yoo Il-ho said the government will stick to the principle that financial support will only be extended to companies that undertake painstaking rescue plans.
Financial aid for ailing companies that shirk their responsibility will result in a waste of taxpayer money.
His comments come after Hanjin Shipping recently slid into court receivership. That's created a logistics quagmire with roughly 60 of Hanjin ships stranded at sea. Hanjin Group, the shipper's parent company, said it plans to give roughly $90 million to its ailing shipping arm to defuse the cargo crisis. But its creditors say that's not enough and it refused to provide additional financial support. The finance chief said the government is pulling out all the stops to normalize operations and that 30 of Hanjin ships have been unloaded. A government task force is also keeping close tabs on the situation at overseas ports, some of which have been refusing to allow the ship's entry following a request for asset seizure. Shifting his remarks to the economy at large, Yu said the focus going forward will be on propping up domestic demand. Consumption has been sluggish as a tax benefit scheme came to an end, and there are lingering concerns that an anti-graft law set to take effect could take a toll on spending. The minister said that while over 70% of a $9.9 billion budget supplement has been disbursed, related ministries will work together so the effects can be felt by the general public as soon as possible. He added that the country's biggest shopping festival will kick off next week, covering a wide range of products with big discounts to encourage spending and attract tourists. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Moving on to a different story now. Back in July, Korean prosecutors summoned 7 executives from Volkswagen's headquarters in Germany to appear for questioning over the auto giant's emissions scandal. Today, the first of them appeared in Seoul, VW's head of emissions certification. For details, let's turn to our Oh Jung-hee.
One of the 7 executives from Volkswagen headquarters summoned by Korean prosecutors appeared for questioning on Wednesday over the worldwide emissions scandal. Detlef Stendel, who serves as emissions certification manager at Volkswagen headquarters, is the first official to be questioned outside Germany, despite ongoing probes in the US, France, and Italy. Speaking outside the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's office, Stendel told reporters that he came to Korea to cooperate with local authorities in their investigation as a witness and a Volkswagen employee and to clarify the facts. He is only one of the 7 executives Seoul prosecutors had called in for questioning in July, and he declined to comment on whether more officials will be coming from the German headquarters. Stendel had visited Korea in July 2011 after Korea's Environment Ministry requested an explanation for the vehicle's excessive emission of nitrogen oxide. But the ministry was unable to get to the bottom of the issue as Stendel then declined to give specific details.
Prosecutors are focusing their questions on why the official declined to provide sufficient information to the Environment Ministry at the time and whether the German headquarters ordered or overlooked the emissions problem.
Volkswagen has been accused of forging test documents for emissions and noise levels in order to receive certification for sales in Korea, which was revoked by the Environment Ministry in early August. Volkswagen has been banned from selling 80 of its models in Korea and has been fined around $16.3 million. Prosecutors are now wrapping up their investigations and will decide what legal punishment to recommend for Volkswagen Korea Chief Thomas Kuhl and Audi Volkswagen Korea CEO Johannes Thammer. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
That concludes our newscast for this hour. Thank you for watching.